Progression of a character gives the ability to interact with the MMO's world in certain ways. It defines your character. It sets the tone of your playstyle. The premise for progression is almost the same in every MMO. When you start your adventure, you need to set yourself up in the game's world. However, in this use of progression, systems can work for or against the player. Classes or your character's archetype can be troublesome for this very reason. Much like committing to a specific college degree or a job in the workforce without having real-life experience to shape an opinion, picking a class during character creation can cause the same friction and even work against the player without realizing it. For this reason, I think that we should open a dialogue about progression and class divergence in MMOs. There are three main gameplay features that are directly related to progression in MMOs: classes, specs, and leveling. Let's dive in, examine what works and what doesn't. I'll be using World of Warcraft in the beginning examples since it is the most broadly known MMO. In an MMO, a class is a broad assignment of your archetype in the game. Most MMOs require you to pick a class up front, giving you information during character creation to help guide your decision. In World of Warcraft's retail version, you are presented with tips about the class, what kind of combat or gameplay the class focuses on, such as melee, ranged, caster, or a mix, and different specializations you can focus on in the Holy Trinity. Some classes can only DPS in World of Warcraft, such as rogues, and some focus on any role in the Holy Trinity, such as druids. If you're anything like me, this selection has given you pause. This is really the first decision in the game, and when you consider the formula of most MMOs, leveling and then on to endgame progression through PvE or PvP, this choice can change a lot about the future of that character. This usually leads to one of three paths for a new player. First, you're forced to research what leveling and endgame progression looks like for a class you're considering to try to make the best decision. This is commonly why you might see a vast plethora of which class should I play videos on YouTube, even before the games are released. It's a big choice. Second, you can base your decision only on the information given in the game. Text doesn't always translate well to gameplay, so you might not know what you're really getting into. Lastly, you may have somewhat of an idea of what you find interesting in MMOs, and choose the character archetype that you've generally gone with before. This can present its own problems too, since not all class archetype names translate to the same gameplay across different games. These abilities are class specific. You won't ever receive the exact same ability from another class, though some are very similar and perform the same functions, such as Priest's or Shaman's resurrection ability. Warcraft's level system is completely linear. You go from point A to B to C until you max level. You are given abilities at certain levels and can't learn anything else beyond these set points. You may go into different zones or level at a different pace from another player, but your experience with progression and leveling up is the same as everyone else in that class. It doesn't really change. I don't necessarily see this as an immediate problem when the system is isolated, but in the context of Warcraft and many other MMOs like it, linear progression of a character can present a second problem: regret and wasted time. We'll dive into those problems a little bit later. The problems I've presented here are born from the linear nature of progression in traditional MMOs. Let's look at how some other more non-traditional MMOs handle character creation and progression of that character. In EVE Online, the only thing you need to worry about during character creation is your character's look, name, and race. EVE Online handles classes essentially different than most MMOs. In fact, they practically don't exist, but some might consider the types of ships to be different classes. However, EVE focuses on player choice above all else in relation to your character. Although you choose a race at the beginning and might seemingly be put into a position to pilot only that race's ships, you can simply learn to pilot any others as well. In fact, there isn't a skill or attribute that anyone in the game can't learn, regardless of any characteristics of that player's character. EVE's progression system is dynamic and non-linear, and EVE has an incredible number of skills you can learn. Of these, the vast majority are passives. They simply enable your character to innately do something better, such as 5% more deterrent accuracy. Beyond any starting skills, any skill you learn must be first acquired through a skill book. Once you inject, essentially read, the skill book, you can start training that skill. Training a skill takes real-life time. We won't get into the exact timings here, but for example, based on your character's attributes, it might take you 4 hours to learn shield management 2. Some advanced skills, such as training how to pilot Minotaur battlecruisers, might take 3 days. Since leveling happens over time, whether you're logged in or not, you're free to do what you'd like to do in the meantime. This is the major upside of this system. If you want to learn how to pilot a Galente strategic cruiser, you can continue fighting pirates in your Caldari destroyer while the skill trains. You can devote your in-game time to anything you'd like to do. Non-linear progression can feel great. If you are focusing on a certain type of cruiser, but decide you'd prefer a faster, more agile ship with less firepower because you like the certain style of gameplay, you can focus on that whenever you like. The skills you've learned wouldn't necessarily have been wasted time. Many skills overlap between ships and activities, so you don't have to start from zero each time you try something new. There are notable downsides to the system though. The first is fairly obvious. You are essentially set in your pace of the game. There are certain character mods and boosts that you can use, but you're still time-bound to a system that doesn't leave much room for movement. Taken away from things that can help your character learn skills faster, there actually isn't a way for you to ever catch up to someone who has played longer. This presents obvious problems in things such as PvP, since one player may simply have more skills learned over time than a newer player. Let's shift to another MMO that puts focus on non-linear character progression and creation. Final Fantasy XIV has several interesting ways to handle classes and progression in a non-linear fashion. Final Fantasy XIV is a game that doesn't really ever require an alternate character, just like EVE. The character creation process is just like any other MMO. You customize your character, learn about backgrounds, and make some choices about the background of your character. You can choose from a few starting classes, such as Archer, Marauder, Arcanist, Rogue, and so on. Once you meet certain level requirements, your character can choose a job, such as Paladin, Scholar, Monk, Black Mage, and the list goes on. Some jobs in Final Fantasy XIV don't have any class requirements, only level requirements based on any class in combination with completion of story quests. Once you learn a job, you don't really need to go back and learn the base classes, unless you want to try something new. That's where the system really shines. You aren't ever bound to a particular class or job. You can always switch out your gear to swap to something else. If you level a monk all the way to max and decide you want to try out a white mage, you need to equip a conjurer weapon, the base class of a white mage. Level the conjurer to 30, and then complete the quest for the white mage. We'll also get more into how Final Fantasy XIV handles releveling soon, which is another interesting system. Final Fantasy XIV doesn't force you to start from zero. If you leveled the Arcanist to 30, went to the Scholar job, and then later decided you wanted to see what Summoner was like, you could immediately start that job, since you already meet the requirements for it. Not all jobs function like this, but many do, and with the newly introduced jobs such as Samurai and Gunbreaker, you start at level 60. The game is very generous about being able to not repeat content. The largest downside I see from Final Fantasy XIV's job system relates to character uniqueness. The job system itself doesn't possess this potential problem, it's a result of specific system design. Although your character's progression can be non-linear as you level, once you hit max, that's the end of diversity. Your character has the exact same abilities as another character's with the same job. The only real differences come from gear, and of course, fashion. That's a big deal in Final Fantasy XIV. Games like Warcraft and Elder Scrolls Online allow your character to specialize into specific divisions of a given class, such as what we spoke of earlier with the Druid from WoW and their ability to specialize in any role in the Holy Trinity, or Warrior's ability to focus on damage or tanking. Specializations can be more than just different branches of how to play your character. The Elder Scrolls Online handles specializations very uniquely via customization. Characters in Elder Scrolls Online have skill points that they acquire as they level, complete certain tasks such as questlines, or collect items such as sky shards. Players can spend these skill points in any manner they like. An important note to this system before diving in is that Elder Scrolls Online limits the number of abilities your character can use at any given time, up to 6. You can level all character skills up, but you can still only have 6 on your action bar at any given time. This can be customized further as you can have 2 bars active, which are usually divided between active abilities you regularly use and buffs that your character should maintain. It's customization within limitations, which can be used to great effect here. Beyond skill points or general class abilities, Elder Scrolls Online also lets you focus on whatever weapon type or armor you'd like. This is my favorite customization system of Elder Scrolls Online. Every character and class can use any kind of weapon or armor. To learn how to use any and become more proficient in that type, you simply pick it up and do so. The same skill points from before can be used to increase the effectiveness of abilities from that weapons or armor skill tree. You can be a destruction staff wielding Dragon Knight, or a plate armor wearing Necromancer. The choice is yours. Compare this to a system like Warcraft's where, for some reason, certain classes can't use certain types of weapons. I can understand an argument where a class like Warcraft's Rogue shouldn't use a staff, but this is specifically because of the context of the game. However, thinking of something like Warcraft Shaman who can't use swords, because reasons, is unfortunate. Even if for no other reason besides the fact that the player might like the aesthetic of swords more, having the choice is important. I don't think one system for weapon use is better than the other. Some features can make sense in the context of a game and a genre that doesn't necessarily work in another game of the same genre because of how the systems intertwine. I do believe though that players should be able to use whatever kind of equipment they want, regardless of class. Next, let's talk about one more aspect of Elder Scrolls Online, the champion system. In most MMOs, the only way to progress your character once they hit max level is to obtain new and more powerful gear. The system is great, but sometimes it leaves a bit to be desired in terms of customization. That's where Elder Scrolls Online's champion system comes in. The champion system is a way to increase your character's power independently of gear. It's purely stat-based. You start to gain champion points upon hitting max level as you continue to do the same activities that would award regular experience before. You can spend these champion points on 3 categories: craft, warfare, and fitness. We won't go into the ultra specifics about what each of these do, but in essence they give you the opportunity to specialize your character as you see fit. If you've ever played Diablo 3, this is a lot like the Paragon system. There are an incredible number of things you can increase. As of this writing, you can obtain a maximum of 3,600 champion points. All of these points can be spent on stat-based improvements, and these points are count-wide. Every character has access to the same amount of points, and each time you get another, all other characters do as well. This is an incredibly powerful way to incentivize gameplay over gear, and gives characters another opportunity to grow. The last game we'll talk about here in terms of character creation and progression is Star Wars Galaxies. It's a great middle ground to a lot of these systems. Before we start, I'm not talking about Star Wars Galaxies, NGE, or new game enhancements. That shit sucked. I'm strictly speaking of the system that was released in 2003, or pre-combat upgrade. As a short note, Star Wars Galaxies called these classes professions instead, and also didn't have the traditional leveling system, which we'll get into later. Star Wars Galaxy's character creation started out like most traditional MMOs. You choose a race, profession, appearance, and a name. However, this is where the system completely diverted. Professions weren't linear. Each profession had a novice box, 4 skill trees, and a master box that you could choose to level up, depending on what you wanted to do. Some of these boxes gave passives, and some gave active abilities. Starting professions, such as Brawler, Medic, Scout, and Artisan, all split into many different professions, all with their own flavors. For instance, if you wanted to be a smuggler, you need to first level the pistols tree in the marksman profession, and then the unarmed tree in the brawler profession. Once you have that, you can train novice smuggler. You could, of course, level a specific tree for an elite professions, such as carbine's tree in the marksman profession, and then start leveling novice carbineer. Some elite professions required you to master an entire starting profession beforehand, such as the doctor's requirement for master medic. The idea behind this concept is to give players choice on how they wanted to develop their character. It's important to note that it wasn't possible to master every profession at once. Your character had a certain amount of skill points to spend. The difference between this system and Elder Scrolls Online was that you started with a certain amount of skill points, instead of earning them as you play. Once they were used up, you had to surrender a skill box to get those skill points back, and learn something else. At its core, I think this is good design. You don't want every player to be the master of everything, especially within the context of how Star Wars Galaxies handled professions and skills. This would create an empty game quickly, as there would be no real difference between one character and the next. However, this system has clear flaws that something like Elder Scrolls Online could clear up. You could, in theory, skill up any profession, but you'd have to sacrifice a lot of time to try something else. And comparatively to Final Fantasy XIV, you level up all jobs and then swap between them at will. That brings me to my last point on character progression and class divergence: leveling. Leveling is a tried and true way to progress a character in nearly any RPG. I don't disagree with leveling, and I don't think the absence of leveling inherently creates a better MMO. It's all about perspective and the systems designers put in place to stop time wasters and improve overall experience. The formula for leveling is simple. You play, you gain levels, you progress, and you hit endgame. This linear process is easy to digest until you're faced with the problem of releveling. Anytime you want to try something new or experience a different playstyle, you're generally forced to do the same thing over and over again with only minor differences, those differences usually being just different abilities of a new class. When I first played World of Warcraft in 2005, and after looking through the classes, I thought Paladin would be the best fit for me. I hadn't really played an MMO like Warcraft before. I dabbled in EverQuest 1 and 2, but never really grasped the concept of this kind of fantasy genre before. I played this paladin for a while, eventually reaching somewhere in the level 20 range, and decided I didn't like it. I created a new character and chose the mage. This time I got all the way to level 44, before deciding I didn't really enjoy the idea of a pure spellcaster. I wanted to be more in the fray of the battles. If anyone watching has played the vanilla version of Warcraft, you'll know that level 40 took one hell of a long time to get to, especially the first time. Understandably, I was disappointed to realize I'd have to do this all over again on my paladin or a new character just to get to the same point, and my friends would massively pass me up in the meantime. This is the feeling of regret I spoke of before. In my personal experience, regret with leveling the wrong class for me has been an unfortunate staple of the MMO genre. Releveling isn't always bad though. Many games handle this differently, so let's highlight a few that handle it in interesting and awesome ways. First up is Star Wars The Old Republic. This is different from Star Wars Galaxies, and we haven't spoken of this game yet. Mostly because I don't feel the majority of its systems are that unique. But Star Wars The Old Republic does have one great feature: story-based leveling. In most MMOs, leveling falls into a repeated and developed narrative arc. Every character experiences the same narrative, regardless of the class or race. There are minor differences of course, but mostly around starting areas that only differ for a few levels. The Old Republic, on the other hand, gives you a new way to experience leveling each time you create a new character, as long as that character is a new class. Each class has its own story through the world, and each story lets you recruit different companions. Since you, in a sense, control the story between you and your companions, your experience is likely different from someone else's. All stories intersect at some point to promote interactivity between players, but other than that, it's a new experience. Leveling as Smuggler sees your character dive into the themes of trust and loyalty, bringing you across the galaxy in search of rare loot, and avoiding newly acquired enemies along the way. The Sith Warrior story lets you rise to a position of power, uncovering the secrets of the Sith while stopping a civil war of sorts within the Sith. These stories are mostly interesting and fun to play, and give you a new way to experience the progression of each character. Story isn't usually the biggest draw to an MMO, however, so many have different systems in place to ensure that releveling is as fun and painless as it can be. Final Fantasy XIV has two systems that I like to highlight. First is the experience boost if you've already leveled a job to a certain point. This makes so much sense. I'm not sure why other MMOs don't do the same thing. If you had a white mage at level 65 and a monk at level 10, your monk would receive a 50% bonus experience point increase until both jobs are at the same level. If you had a job at level 70 or above, this bonus is increased to 100%. It's an incredible reward for leveling a job up before deciding to try something else. These bonuses can stack with other experience boosts as well, such as rested or food buffs, making the system very powerful for leveling quickly if you've done it before. The second way Final Fantasy shines in this regard is their dungeon sync system. Some MMOs such as Warcraft have this as well. In Final Fantasy XIV, the first dungeon, guild hest, raid, and so on you queue for gives you bonus experience points, and a pretty hefty sum of it. This system is a circle of reward for all players because max level characters can also queue for leveling dungeons and receive an appropriate max level reward from it. This ensures that lower level players or those who are releveling have a steady source of players to run dungeons with. It's an excellent system. The last two leveling systems I like to highlight are back in Warcraft. The first is Party Sync. This system can be used in two ways. You can level with a friend when you already have a max level character, in essence just simply playing the game with them. Or you can choose to redo these quests with another character that isn't max level. This solves the problem of not being able to play with friends when there is a level discrepancy. If a friend has a level 20 Warlock and you have a level 50 Priest, you can toggle Party Sync and make all of the quests you've already done before, up to the Warlock's level, repeatable. At the same time, you'll be stripped of some higher level abilities and attributes, so you don't decimate everything in your path. This system is beautiful when you combine it with Warcraft's Recruit a Friend system, which gives you and your friend increased experience if you're in a group together. Besides Party Sync, Warcraft gives you some alternate ways to level and gain experience, such as PvP. It can be argued that it is not as effective as regular leveling, but regardless, some players enjoy PvP over PvE, and will simply choose to do this instead because it's a viable option. No character progression or class system is perfect, but many of these games handle it very well. I'd love to see some crossover between these systems, especially the skill systems from Star Wars Galaxies, Elder Scrolls Online, EVE Online, and the leveling system from Final Fantasy XIV. However, game design isn't just about copying what works. As I explained in my last video about Phantasy Star Online, some systems can work within the context of the game and genre without working in another game of the same genre. It's about how designers choose to have the players experience these game systems. It's about finding the fun. It's about how all these systems intertwine to create something unique. This was a relatively high-level overview of different systems within MMOs. Let me know down below if you're interested in seeing a deep dive on any subjects such as class divergence or any other topics about MMOs. But I think that's it for me on this one. If you hated this video, please make sure to level up that dislike button. Otherwise, drop a like, sub, go play some MMOs. Peace.